Where the hell were we? What are we talking about? Oh, yes, right. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 4 of Done Better. Today we're going to be looking at Marvel's The Ant-Man. So let's do it. Let's make Ant-Man better.
You talking to me? You talking to me? Joe, move. I'm standing here. You make the move. Oh yeah? Well, I'm the only one here.
Okay, so many of you might be wondering what was wrong with Ant-Man in the first place. For one, there are two main protagonists, one of which who doesn't change anything over the course of the story other than his size, and the other whose arc is completed not over the course of the story, but in an after-credit sequence. Yellow Jacket was another one of those cliche, white, suited-up Marvel villains. And the script itself suffers from the one jar, too many hands concept. That's an analogy you might not have heard of, and that's because I just made it up, I think. So the basic concept is that there's a screenwriting jar, and every screenwriter that comes along feels like they have to shove that hand into that screenwriting jar, because how are they relevant and getting paid for this if they don't put their own little brand and spin on it? The story might be fine, but it doesn't matter. They need to put their hand in there. So as each writer comes along, they kind of stick a hand in, then another hand gets shoved in, then more and more hands, until the end there's about 4 or 5 hands in that jar. And everyone knows that if you fit 4 or 5 hands into a jar, it either breaks or it gets really clustered and starts to crack. And at the end, who wants a jar of human hands? I certainly don't. I personally prefer 1 or 2 hands in my jar, preferably 1. But sometimes you need a second, just to bounce some ideas off of this jar. Was that analogy good? Number 1, main Michael Douglas. Let's make Hank Pym the main character. Number 2, remotivate Yellow Jacket. He's a terrible villain. And number 3, hammer the humor the right way. That was a pun, because Edgar Wright's last name is Wright. So, in the film, Hank Pym shares the spotlight with Scott Lang, but of the 2 characters, Hank Pym's more interesting. He's lost the most to this technology, and he's set up to evolve the most over the course of the film. Obviously, in the final film, Scott's our main man, but in general, his arc isn't very interesting. He kind of goes from a master thief who cares very deeply about his daughter to a master thief who cares very deeply about his daughter, but also has an Ant-Man suit and can talk to ants. I feel like if they actually wanted to make Scott a more interesting character, they would have had him realize that maybe he wasn't the best influence on his daughter. Maybe his daughter should form a new relationship with the cop dad, cop boyfriend, cop, basically the character who's dating Judy Greer's character from Jurassic World, which I didn't realize was a crossover. I didn't realize that she was the sticking point for these 2 franchises merging together.
You just went and made a new dinosaur?
I know.
Probably not a good idea.
It wasn't my idea.
Judy Greer's a great actress. What are you doing, everyone? Anyway, Scott's outside the point. We're talking about Hank Pym. So the foundation for Pym's arc was in the story itself. It's all about how he views his suit and his technology that he's created. It pretty much killed his wife, which motivated him to actually turn away from his own creation. And that decision went so far as to even create a rift between him and his own daughter, because he's trying to protect her, basically, from this technology and the truth of what happened. But really, that's kind of just selfish, right? Because what he actually wants is to protect himself from losing somebody that he loves again, which means that he actually went and handpicked somebody that he doesn't care about that could potentially die. That's pretty interesting as a character, to be okay with killing somebody as long as you don't love them. Now, as you might have seen in the film, Hank Pym's arc doesn't actually complete in that sappy, weird scene before the 3rd act. That's the one where he actually reveals the fate of his wife to his daughter. So instead, we are treated to the completion of Hank Pym's arc at the end, halfway through the credits, in a scene that was set up for us to go, Wasp? But that scene actually accidentally completes Pym's arc. It's kind of sad when your character's arc comes full circle accidentally. But you see what I'm saying. Accepting his daughter for who she is and what she does is what completes this. By the way, I don't really want to go into how terrible the character Hope Van Dien was handled. Simply labeling a woman as uptight and tough doesn't really make a character, and you have to do more with that. You can't just say, okay, those 2 things. Boop. Oh, Jesus. So anyway, make Hank Pym the focus of the story, and Scott Lang can be a nice subplot that reflects his own issues he's going through. And all these pieces were actually set up in the film. They just never really fulfilled what they were intended to do. Instead, we got a bunch of scenes of Paul Rudd dancing with his buddies and shit. That wasn't in the movie. So they put those scenes in a trailer after the movie came out, knowing full well those scenes weren't in the movie. Was that to get more people to come to it? You don't know. You're telling me there's not even anybody standing over there? Well, then who the f*** am I talking to?
You want to show me how to punch? Show me.
That's how you punch.
I am just incredibly bored with villains these days. Example, Ant-Man's Darren Cross. His motivation? Sell tech, get money. But what about the goddamn laser gun he has that he keeps turning people into snot piles with? Isn't that technology enough? You can wipe out an entire goddamn army with that. You don't need any stupid, silly suits. You just go, bah. And yet that whole thing was ignored. It was only used to show like, oh yes, Darren Cross is evil. He killed that guy. But even that doesn't make sense. Hey, where's Jerry? I don't know, man. Last time anybody saw him was at that Pym particle place that's all dangerous. Are you sure we shouldn't go look for a guy that literally disappeared out of thin air at a place that messes around with particles? It's not goddamn important, Tom. There's really not much to say about Darren Cross's character. Much like the Hope Van Dien character. They kind of applied a couple things to him. He's evil, he wants money, and then they said, okay, that's good enough. We'll see how that works. At some point, the bullshit idea of Darren Cross is evil because the Pym particles without the helmets make you go crazy and evil. That's just groan-inducing. It's brought up once, mentioned twice, and then it doesn't really come into play. This isn't you, Darren. It's those Pym particles on your brain. Bullshit. How would we know that? We've only seen him be an asshole the entire film. Don't tell us he's something he's not. That's like telling me Cecil the Lion isn't the greatest lion that ever lived. According to Facebook and the internet, he's the greatest goddamn lion that ever lived, and I've seen nothing to the contrary. All evidence seems to prove that he is the lion god. Some might even say the Lion King. So what can we do to change Darren Cross's character to be more interesting and have full motivation? Well, let's actually make him more like Hank Pym, which the movie tries to do by saying, you're too much like me, Darren Cross. That's why I had to turn away from you. Bullshit. There are no similarities between these two characters in the film. Just because you say something doesn't mean it is something. So let's actually make some. Let's make Cross a little nerdier, a little less suave and suited, and not money obsessed. So basically from Darren's perspective, Hank Pym mentored him, then abandoned him. He has to take over and run the company, then recreate the science that he knows his mentor has access to. But his mentor actually took that technology, is hiding it from him, and doesn't want to share it with him because of his own personal reasons, which is a pretty shitty thing to do to somebody. This actually makes Darren a sympathetic character whose life is so crazy and stressed out because of Hank Pym that when he finally does unlock the suit and get the tech, of course he's gonna go crazy and snap. He's at the breaking point. Here he is, keeping that company afloat for years, while Pym abandoned him. Then he's forced to recreate a technology he knows already exists, but his mentor took. And after years of suffering to recreate it, with the government and the military hammering down on top of him, forcing him to make it happen, he finally does. Then bam, Hank Pym shows up. He's got a new mentor subject that he just plucked off the street, and he decides, I'm gonna show up and f*** your life up again. And Pym decides he's gonna steal and destroy the thing that has caused so many years of anguish and suffering to Cross. I would be f***ing pissed. I would want revenge for that. I would want to kill the Ant-Man too. In this way, Darren actually becomes yet another victim of Hank Pym's overarching problem with his own technology. Then Darren dying might actually have some sort of weight to it at the end. Pym basically drove a man to insanity, then drove a man to his own death. It's kind of fucked up. And on that depressing note,
One question. Is it too late to change the name?
I feel like Ant-Man actually missed the point that they themselves seem so aware of at the beginning. Ant-Man is a ridiculous superhero. The initial trailers actually seemed to embrace this self-reflexive state of mind. But then the film was released and those lines were actually cut from the film. So was it clever marketing to get people in the seats, or a mishandling of what should have been their very core concept? I'm gonna go with number 2. Everybody knows or should know the story of Edgar Wright and the Ant-Man. If you don't, go look it up on the internet. Don't look at porn. Don't close that tab. I feel like Edgar Wright, who's always had a really strong grasp on comedy, likely would have taken the script in the direction it should have gone, which is just embracing the ridiculousness of the concept of a man shrinking to the size of an ant and talking with ants. A diving board for the humor actually could have come from the two Ant-Men themselves, Scott Lang and Hank Pym. First there's Pym, who actually used the suit in battle and in war, and then he ultimately lost his wife to this technology, and then his relationship with his daughter suffered from it. So basically the suit is just this thorn in his side that caused him all this pain and misery. And then there's Scott, who sees the Ant-Man persona and the suit, and he doesn't really take it that seriously. If you look at it that way, there should have been some great humor coming from the two personalities and two different perspectives clashing over this concept of an Ant-Man. And two clashing personalities has obviously never worked for humor in any other film, ever. That wouldn't create humor. This is sarcasm. There are many films that use that trope correctly, and to very humorous effect. Except for that one. That one was shit. As much as they wanted it to be, this was not a heist film. It should have been a comedy action film like pretty much every other Marvel film, with an emphasis on the comedy. And then the heist elements could have been woven in to make it a little more interesting. Because Ant-Man's as much a heist film as Ocean's 12 is a good movie. and Ocean's 12 is a shitty movie. Do you remember the part where they were like, hey, Julia Roberts, you look like Julia Roberts? What the f*** is that? Wouldn't that mean the rest of the characters look like themselves as well? They may as well have just had Danny Ocean sit down with the rest of his crew and just say, hey, you know what? I have an idea. We all perfectly resemble the cast of Ocean's 11. How can we use this to heist things? So, there we go. Ant-Man done better. Obviously not a lot of big stuff, but little things that could have made this a much, much better film and a little more fun. So before we go, of course, we're gonna do our little bits and pieces and things that could have changed, so let's look at it. The Ant-Man suit should have been making the appropriate noise, not the one they had in the film.
Hey, did I save your life? Scotty! Scotty!
God, you're annoying, Louise.
Hey, are we the good guys?
Yes, of course.
We're the good guys, right?
Yeah, we've been the good guys this entire film.
Feels kind of weird, you know?
Yeah, it's called terrible writing.
Let's just be honest, the soundtrack kind of sucked in this, and I feel like it could have been greatly improved.
For him and himself and everybody around, cause he ain't got nobody to listen.
Obviously, there should have been way more blood and violence. Marvel movies skimp on that. I feel like if they'd done it with this one, it would have just worked. They needed a laugh track for all the heist buddies' antics.
Hey, how's your girl, man?
She left me.
Oh.
Yeah, my mom died too. And my dad got deported. But I got the band.
Nice.
And finally, there should have been a better training montage. If you're gonna do a montage, you're gonna do training, you get the proper music, and you do it right. Well, everybody, thank you again for watching. I'm hoping that you're enjoying these. Remember to let me know if you think I should tackle a film that could be done better, and I will happily try to do that. Also, always let me know if you disagree on certain points and things that I'm talking about. I'll look at it and do not care.